Beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, hidden in the silent darkness of shipwrecks older than the pyramids, lies a treasure far more valuable than gold or jewels, a collection of 23 ancient scripts that have shattered everything we thought we knew about the Bronze Age. These aren't just fragments of pottery or broken artifacts, they're time capsules carrying the voices of people who lived over 3,000 years ago. Picture this: a fisherman's net snags on something unexpected, or a diver's light glints off a clay tablet encrusted with coral. In that moment, history itself is pulled from the depths, waiting to rewrite the stories we've told for centuries. What makes these shipwrecked scripts so extraordinary? They're not just records of kings and battles, they're intimate glimpses into everyday life, revealing lost languages, bustling trade routes, and cultural connections that spanned continents. Imagine holding a tablet that details a merchant's inventory, or a prayer etched into clay by someone who lived in a world where the gods were as real as the sea. These discoveries have forced historians to rethink the Bronze Age, proving it wasn't a time of isolated kingdoms, but a vibrant, interconnected web of civilizations. And here's the most astonishing part: these scripts survived against all odds, preserved by the very waters that should have destroyed them. This is the story of how 23 fragile pieces of history changed everything. We'll journey from the depths of the Aegean to the shores of ancient Anatolia, following the clues these scripts left behind. You'll hear how deciphering just one line of text overturned decades of scholarship, and how a single shipwreck revealed trade networks stretching from Egypt to the far corners of Europe. But more than that, this is a story about us, about how the past keeps speaking if we're willing to listen. So let's dive in together and uncover the secrets these waves have guarded for millennia. The Bronze Age is about to get a lot more fascinating. The Bronze Age wasn't just a chapter in history, it was the moment humanity stepped onto a global stage. Think of it as the first time civilizations truly stretched beyond their borders, trading not just goods but ideas, stories, and innovations. Those 23 shipwrecked scripts. They're like a fingerprint left on the doorknob of history, showing us who came and went in this ancient world. For centuries, we imagined Bronze Age societies as isolated kingdoms, each with their own customs and languages. But these fragile clay tablets tell a different story, one of diplomats exchanging letters across the sea, merchants bartering in bustling ports, and scribes borrowing symbols from distant cultures to create something entirely new. Take the Hittites, for example. Before these scripts were found, historians believed their empire communicated mostly through local dialects. But one waterlogged tablet recovered near the coast of Turkey revealed a royal letter written in both Hittite and Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the time. It's like finding an ancient email with the translate button already pressed. And then there's the Mycenaeans, whose Linear B script was once thought to be used only for palace inventories. Yet a single tablet from a sunken merchant vessel lists exotic spices from Egypt alongside tools from the far north, proving their trade networks reached farther than anyone guessed. What's truly breathtaking is how these discoveries rewrite the timeline of human connection. A receipt for olive oil might not sound thrilling, but when it's dated 300 years earlier than previously recorded trade between Crete and Egypt, suddenly the map of the ancient world expands. These scripts don't just fill gaps, they reveal highways of interaction we never knew existed. And perhaps most moving of all, they give voice to ordinary people. A prayer scribbled on a broken piece of pottery, a sailor's note home, even a merchant's complaint about late payments. These aren't the grand proclamations of kings. They're the whispers of daily life, preserved by salt and silt, waiting centuries to remind us that the past was never as distant as we thought. The real magic lies in how these texts defy their own fragility. Fire destroyed libraries, time eroded monuments, but the sea, it guarded these messages like a secret. Now, as we piece together their stories, we're not just learning about the Bronze Age, we're seeing the blueprint of our own interconnected world. Every cracked tablet is a thread in a tapestry that stretches across millennia, showing us how innovation, culture, and human curiosity have always bound us together. And that's the true power of these shipwrecked scripts. They don't just change history, they change how we see ourselves. Finding these ancient scripts wasn't just luck, it was a mix of cutting-edge science and old-fashioned detective work. Imagine teams of archaeologists hovering over sonar screens, their eyes scanning for the faintest irregularity on the ocean floor. A slight shadow, a gentle rise in the seabed. These were the clues that led to some of the most significant discoveries in Bronze Age history. But the real challenge began once they pinpointed a potential wreck. Divers had to descend into the silent darkness, where time itself seemed suspended, armed with tools gentle enough to handle relics older than empires. One of the most remarkable finds came from the Uluburun shipwreck, a vessel that sank off the coast of Turkey over 3,000 years ago. When archaeologists first brushed away the layers of sediment, they uncovered a cargo hold packed with treasures, ivory, glass, and precious metals. But the true jackpot, a collection of clay tablets, some still sealed in their original clay envelopes. These weren't just random scraps. They were royal correspondence, letters between kings and merchants, preserved in stunning detail. The water, which should have erased their inscriptions, instead acted like a time capsule, keeping oxygen and decay at bay for centuries. The process of recovering these scripts was as delicate as brain surgery. Some tablets crumbled at the slightest touch, their clay bodies weakened by centuries underwater. To save them, researchers used specially designed containers filled with filtered seawater, slowly acclimating the artifacts to the surface world over weeks or even months. In one case, a wooden writing board, a rarity since wood rarely survives millennia, had to be freeze-dried to prevent it from disintegrating into dust the moment it left the water. Every step was a race against time, with each script threatening to vanish before it could tell its story. What's truly astonishing is how these discoveries unfolded. A single dive could turn a routine survey into a historic moment. Take the Cape Jelladonia wreck, where archaeologists expected to find typical trade goods. Instead, they unearthed a merchant's ledger, its cuneiform script detailing transactions across the Mediterranean. Or the Dokos wreck, the oldest known shipwreck in the world, where a broken piece of pottery bore hastily scribbled marks, proof that writing wasn't just for elites, but for everyday people too. These shipwrecks didn't just give us scripts, they gave us context. A tablet found near Greece wasn't just a lone artifact. It was part of a cargo that included Egyptian scarabs and Cypriot pottery, painting a vivid picture of a connected world. And with each recovery, the puzzle of the Bronze Age grew clearer. The sea, once seen as a barrier, was actually the ancient world's superhighway, carrying not just goods but ideas, languages, and innovations. Every script pulled from the depths is a reminder that history isn't set in stone. It's written on clay, wood, and pottery, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The Uluburun letters don't just open a window into Bronze Age diplomacy, they shatter the glass entirely. These clay tablets, pulled from a shipwreck off the Turkish coast, are like eavesdropping on a 3,000-year-old Zoom call between kings. Written in Akkadian, the ancient world's version of a universal language, they reveal a level of political maneuvering that would make modern diplomats nod in recognition. One particularly gripping letter reads like a crisis hotline, a desperate plea from a Hittite king to his ally in Cyprus, begging for reinforcements as enemy forces close in. The urgency in those cuneiform strokes is palpable proof that geopolitics hasn't changed as much as we might think. But it's not all doom and gloom. Another tablet details what might be history's first recorded trade deal, with a Babylonian ruler haggling over the price of silver and lapis lazuli like a merchant at a bazaar. The precision is staggering. Weights, measures, even quality guarantees are spelled out in meticulous detail. This wasn't just bartering, it was high-stakes commerce conducted across hundreds of miles, with scribes acting as ancient notaries to seal the agreements. What's truly revolutionary is how these letters rewrite our understanding of Bronze Age logistics. Forget isolated city-states. Here were rulers coordinating shipments, troops, and treaties with the efficiency of a modern supply chain. Perhaps most revealing is the sheer volume of correspondence. The Uluburun wreck alone yielded dozens of tablets, suggesting a constant flow of messengers braving stormy seas to deliver these clay communiques. Imagine the scene: a scribe in Thebes pressing symbols into wet clay, sealing it with a royal insignia, then entrusting it to a captain who'd navigate by the stars to reach a foreign court. The risks were enormous: storms, pirates, the ever-present threat of a cracked tablet rendering the message illegible. Yet they did it because these words weren't just ink on paper. They were the glue holding empires together. And then there's the human touch. Buried among the formal treaties is a tablet that reads like an ancient Yelp review, a merchant complaining about delayed shipments of copper, his frustration etched forever in clay. It's moments like these that remind us, behind every empire were people impatient, hopeful, fallible. The Uluburun letters don't just tell us about kings and treaties. They whisper the names of scribes who mixed the clay, sailors who guarded the cargo, and translators who bridged languages and cultures. Every stroke of their stylus was a thread in the fabric of a connected world, one we're only now beginning to truly see. The Cape Jelladonia Cargo Manifest is more than just an ancient shopping list. It's a Bronze Age spreadsheet, meticulously documenting a world buzzing with commerce. When divers first pulled this clay tablet from the wreckage near Turkey's southern coast, they expected to find another royal letter. Instead, they uncovered something far more revealing: the day-to-day paperwork of a working merchant. Written in a fascinating blend of Luwian and Cypriot scripts, this manifest reads like a snapshot of globalization's earliest days. Copper ingots from Cyprus, ivory from Syria, spices that may have traveled all the way from the Indus Valley, each entry carefully noted with weights, values, and even the names of trading partners. What makes this discovery so groundbreaking isn't just what's on the list, but how it's organized. The tablet divides goods into categories with separate columns for quantity, quality assessments, and even negotiated prices. Some entries include notes like "payment pending" or "to be inspected at Knossos," showing a system of accountability that wouldn't feel out of place in a modern warehouse. One particularly telling detail: multiple hands wrote on this tablet, suggesting different merchants or scribes updated it as cargo changed hands during the voyage. This wasn't just record keeping, it was real-time logistics, Bronze Age style. The manifest also holds clues about the people behind the trade. One entry mentions the red-haired trader from Byblos, while another references a shipment delayed by storms near Rhodes. These aren't dry figures, they're human stories etched in clay. Even the mix of writing systems speaks volumes. The Luwian Cypriot blend suggests scribes adapted their methods to bridge language barriers, creating what might be history's first multilingual business documents. Perhaps most startling is what this reveals about trade volume. The quantities listed, tons of copper, hundreds of ivory tusks, point to operations on an industrial scale. Historians once imagined Bronze Age trade as small-scale barter between neighbors, but this manifest paints a different picture: scheduled routes, standardized weights, and established trade hubs. Some entries even show price fluctuations based on distance traveled, proving these merchants understood concepts like shipping costs and market demand. Then there's the elephant in the room, or rather, the tin that isn't. The manifest carefully records copper shipments but mentions tin only once, despite both metals being essential for bronze production. This single omission rewrote history's understanding of Bronze Age supply chains. Archaeologists now believe tin traveled via separate, highly secretive routes, possibly explaining why one civilization after another collapsed when those routes were disrupted. A mundane cargo list became the key to understanding one of antiquity's greatest mysteries. What emerges from this salt-crusted tablet is nothing short of a commercial revolution. These weren't just sailors hauling goods, they were pioneers of globalization, navigating not just the Mediterranean's waters but its complex web of cultures, languages, and economies. Every stroke of their stylus was a declaration. The Bronze Age world was far more sophisticated, far more connected than we ever dared to imagine, and thanks to a shipwreck's cruel mercy, their paperwork survived to tell the tale. The fragment of clay pulled from the seabed near Anatolia might be broken, but its message is anything but incomplete. This palm-sized piece of history, etched with the precise wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, contains phrases that would reshape our understanding of Bronze Age diplomacy. No hostilities between them, shall be at peace. Return the refugees to their homes. These aren't just words, they're the surviving echoes of what may be the world's first recorded peace treaty, a maritime copy of the legendary Treaty of Kaddish between the Hittites and Egyptians. That this fragile agreement was found on a shipwreck is no accident. It suggests these treaties weren't singular monuments to diplomacy but living documents, reproduced and distributed like ancient newsletters to reassure allies across the Mediterranean. Consider the context. The original Treaty of Kaddish, carved into silver tablets now lost, was forged after one of history's earliest documented battles around 1285 BC. But this waterlogged fragment proves the agreement didn't just sit in royal archives. It traveled by ship, no less, hinting at a network of city-states and vassals who needed to witness its terms. The clauses preserved on this tablet are revelatory. One passage outlines mutual defense obligations, requiring both empires to come to each other's aid if attacked by outsiders. Another mandates the repatriation of refugees, showing a surprisingly modern concern for displaced populations. What's most striking is how familiar the language feels. Swap cuneiform for PDFs, and you've got the skeleton of a contemporary international agreement. The Hittites and Egyptians didn't just stop fighting. They built systems for enforcement, communication, and even conflict resolution. A damaged but legible line references judges who would mediate disputes, suggesting these weren't just hollow promises but mechanisms designed to last. And the fact that this copy was en route somewhere, perhaps to a Hittite garrison in Cyprus or an Egyptian outpost in the Levant, tells us these empires understood something profound. Peace required active maintenance, not just ceremonial declarations. The fragment also hints at darker truths. The very need for detailed refugee provisions speaks to the brutal displacement caused by their wars. One heartbreaking entry lists categories of people to be returned: the potter, the weaver, the scribe. These weren't faceless masses but skilled workers whose forced relocation had economic consequences. Even more telling, The treaty's survival at sea implies other copies likely reached their destinations, meaning this maritime distribution system was standard practice. Imagine scribes in Hattusa or Thebes pressing identical terms into dozens of clay tablets, loading them onto ships like diplomatic care packages bound for distant shores. This broken piece of clay does more than document a truce. It reveals the Bronze Age's sophisticated machinery of peace. The meticulous wording, the distribution methods, the enforcement clauses all point to a world where written agreements carried real weight. And that's what makes this shipwrecked fragment priceless. The Treaty of Kaddish was already famous, but this soggy cousin proves it wasn't just for show. It worked. For nearly a century after its signing, Egypt and Hatti avoided major wars, trading instead of raiding, building instead of burning. In those quiet years, because of documents like this one, merchants could sail safely, refugees could return home, and two superpowers learned that sometimes clay could be stronger than swords. Among the most revealing finds from the Bronze Age isn't a grand royal decree or a warrior's weapon. It's a humble clay tablet listing jars of olive oil. Recovered from a shipwreck near Crete, this Linear B inscription reads like a 3,000-year-old packing slip, detailing every item aboard a Mycenaean trading vessel down to the last amphora. But don't let its mundane appearance fool you. This waterlogged inventory is a master key, unlocking secrets about how Bronze Age societies functioned with a level of organization that rivals modern systems. The tablet's contents paint a vivid picture of maritime commerce: 48 jars of olive oil, 36 of wine, stacks of painted pottery, and even textiles folded carefully in storage. What's astonishing isn't just the cargo, it's the precision. Each entry includes quantities, quality grades, and designated destinations, suggesting a standardized system of weights and measures across the Aegean. Some jars are marked for the palace, others market-bound, revealing a clear hierarchy in trade distribution. Even more telling, the crew manifests scribbled along the tablet's edges. Names like Koros, son of Atreus, and Tisaminos of Pylos transform this from a sterile record into a roster of real people, their livelihoods tied to the sea's unpredictable currents. This level of bureaucracy shatters old assumptions about Mycenaean society. Historians once pictured a warrior culture fixated on conquest, but here's proof their economy ran on paperwork as much as spear points. The tablet structure is methodical, divided into sections for commodities, personnel, and even customs notations. One entry notes a deduction of oil for the storm god's offering, blending commerce with religion in a single line. Another records a payment dispute resolved by docking a sailor's wine ration, showing how closely labor and logistics were intertwined. Perhaps most revolutionary is what the tablet doesn't say. Unlike earlier Bronze Age records from Mesopotamia or Egypt, there's no mention of slaves hauling goods. The crew members listed have distinct identities and hometowns, hinting at a system where labor might have been contractual rather than coerced. And the variety of destinations from mainland Greek ports to distant Cycladic islands suggests these weren't erratic trading ventures but scheduled routes, maintained with almost clockwork regularity. Then there's the handwriting itself. Linear B's angular symbols crowd the tablet's surface, yet corrections and additions prove this wasn't just copied, it was actively used during the voyage. You can almost picture the scribe crouched on deck, updating counts as jars were unloaded, his stylus pressing fresh marks into the damp clay. Some entries are smudged, perhaps by sea spray or hurried fingers, making the document feel startlingly alive. This single tablet does more than list cargo. It reconstructs an entire economic ecosystem. The olive oil wasn't just sustenance, it was currency traded for Cypriot copper or Egyptian gold. The wine jars are diplomatic tools gifted to secure alliances. Every number etched into that clay was a thread in a vast Mediterranean web of exchange, proving the Mycenaeans weren't just participants in Bronze Age globalization, they helped invent it. And thanks to a shipwreck's cruel irony, their meticulous record-keeping survived to tell the tale. The lost city of Ugarit wasn't just another Bronze Age settlement, it was the Wall Street of the ancient world, and its recently discovered trade records prove it. When divers recovered a waterlogged chest from a sunken ship near Syria's coast, they expected to find typical cargo. Instead, they unearthed a Bronze Age filing cabinet, stacks of clay tablets detailing transactions so extensive they rewrite our understanding of Mediterranean commerce. Written in Ugaritic cuneiform, a script as elegant as it is ancient, these records don't just list goods. They reveal an economic network stretching from the shores of Cyprus to the distant islands of Sardinia, with Ugarit at its beating heart. One tablet stands out like an ancient spreadsheet frozen in time. It meticulously documents a single season's trade, 200 talents of copper from Cyprus exchanged for Egyptian linen, 15 jars of that legendary purple dye made from rare sea snails, and most intriguingly, 10 measures of tin from the north. That last entry sent historians into a frenzy. Northern tin sources were the Bronze Age equivalent of trade secrets, fiercely guarded because tin was essential for making bronze. The fact that Ugaritic merchants were dealing in it suggests they had access to routes stretching far beyond the Mediterranean, possibly as far as Britain or even Afghanistan. But what truly brings these records to life are the human details scribbled in the margins. One tablet notes a shipment delayed because the Hittite merchant fell ill, while another complains about counterfeit purple dye being passed off as genuine. There's even a receipt for oil lamps purchased by what appears to be a Mesopotamian diplomat's wife, proof that Ugarit wasn't just a trade hub but a cosmopolitan melting pot where elites from rival empires rubbed shoulders in bustling markets. The scale of organization is staggering. Some tablets functioned as ancient letters of credit, allowing merchants to withdraw goods from warehouses in distant ports using clay tokens as proof of purchase. Others track interest payments on loans, showing sophisticated financial systems operating millennia before modern banking. One particularly revealing record lists customs duties paid by ships from 7 different kingdoms, each taxed according to their cargo: olive oil from Crete, ivory from Syria, and that mysterious northern tin. Then there's the purple dye, mentioned so frequently it must have been Ugarit's signature export. Produced from thousands of crushed murex snails, this vibrant pigment was worth more than its weight in silver, reserved for royalty across the ancient world. The records show entire families dedicated to its production, with quotas and quality controls that would satisfy modern manufacturers. One heartbreaking entry documents a shipment lost at sea: 20 pounds of dye, enough to color a king's robes, now resting somewhere on the Mediterranean floor alongside the scribe who recorded its loss. These soggy tablets do more than list transactions. They reveal Ugarit as the linchpin of Bronze Age globalization. Its scribes wrote in multiple languages, its merchants navigated by stars and trade winds, and its warehouses held goods from every corner of the known world. When this ship sank with its cargo of records, it wasn't just a business going under, it was a vibrant, connected way of life slipping beneath the waves. Now, as we decipher these water-stained pages of history, we're not just learning about ancient economics, we're meeting the people who made the Mediterranean the world's first great marketplace, one clay tablet at a time. The linear, a tablet pulled from the wreckage, isn't just an artifact, it's a locked door, and we've been searching for the key for over a century. Unlike its cousin Linear B, which scholars cracked in the 1950s to reveal Mycenaean Greek, this script remains stubbornly silent, its symbols dancing just beyond our understanding. Found nestled among trade goods on a sunken Minoan vessel, this particular tablet is tantalizing. The clay bears the familiar imprints of a stylus, but the arrangement is unlike any inventory list we've seen. Curved lines intersect with looping symbols in a pattern that suggests more than simple record-keeping. This could be a contract, a treaty, or even a prayer to the gods of the deep. What makes this discovery so electrifying is the context. Linear tablets are rare on land, often found in fragments at palace sites like Knossos. But here, on a ship midway between Crete and the Greek mainland, the script was clearly mobile, a working document, not just ceremonial script. The tablet's edges show wear from handling, its surface indented where cargo ropes might have pressed against it in transit. This wasn't something precious stored in a temple. It was a tool of commerce, smudged with the fingerprints of sailors and merchants who relied on its contents daily. Theories about Linear A's meaning have flourished like seagrass. Some linguists point to the repeating sequences of symbols, arguing they resemble accounting notations, perhaps quantities of saffron or bronze ingots. Others note the abrupt shifts in symbol groups, suggesting poetic meter or even magical incantations meant to protect the voyage. One radical hypothesis proposes the script isn't a language at all, but a cryptographic system used exclusively by Minoan trading guilds to guard commercial secrets. Imagine a Bronze Age version of corporate encryption, where only initiated merchants could read the true meaning. Then there's the script's physical journey. The tablet was found near Thera, the volcanic island whose catastrophic eruption around 1600 BC may have hastened the Minoans' decline. Was this vessel fleeing the disaster, its scribes still clutching records of debts and deliveries? Or does the tablet's presence prove trade continued long after the eruption, contradicting assumptions about the Minoans' sudden collapse? The clay itself holds clues. Traces of pumice dust embedded in its surface suggest it was inscribed near active volcanoes, possibly in the very shadow of Thera's smoking peak. Most haunting is what we might never know. Without a bilingual text like the Rosetta Stone, Linear may forever keep its secrets, yet this single shipwrecked tablet offers hope. Its symbols align closely with markings found on Minoan pottery across the Mediterranean, proving the script traveled as far as the ships that carried it. Every time archaeologists uncover another fragment, whether in a Cretan storeroom or the hold of a sunken trader, the puzzle gains another piece, and somewhere in that growing mosaic, the voice of the Minoans waits to be heard, not as mythical labyrinth builders, but as pragmatic traders who wrote their world into clay before the waves claimed it. The Amarna Letters weren't meant to be found at sea. These delicate clay tablets, inscribed with the diplomatic chatter of pharaohs and kings, were supposed to rest in the royal archives of Akhenaten's capital. Yet there it was, a fractured piece of history, dredged from a shipwreck off Cyprus, its cuneiform symbols still whispering of lapis lazuli and prized horses. This wasn't just any letter, it was a direct plea to the Egyptian court, sent by a ruler desperate to secure favor. The fact that it ended up underwater, far from the desert sands of Amarna, suggests something extraordinary. These weren't one-off messages, but part of a circulating system of diplomatic templates, copied and shared like ancient playbooks for maintaining power. The fragment's contents read like a Bronze Age gift registry. A foreign king, possibly from Mitanni or Babylon, lavishes Akhenaten with blue gemstones, as blue as the heavens, and promises of horses swift as the desert wind. But beneath the flattery lies raw political calculus. Lapis lazuli, mined only in distant Afghanistan, was rarer than gold in Egypt, symbolizing divine connection. Horses, equally precious, were the tanks of ancient warfare, traded selectively to maintain military advantage. Every word on this tablet was a strategic move in a high-stakes game, where gifts weren't generosity but carefully weighted leverage. What's revolutionary isn't just what the letter says, but where it was found. Cyprus was a crossroads, not a superpower. For a diplomatic document to wash up here implies these letters weren't singular communications but reproducible templates, carried by envoys as reference materials. Imagine a scribe on this ill-fated ship, carefully transcribing phrases from the original onto fresh clay, gracious greetings, gifts befitting your majesty, to repurpose for local negotiations. The sea, usually a destroyer of words, preserved this fragment as proof that diplomacy wasn't improvised. It followed scripts as precise as the cuneiform wedges themselves. The fragment also hints at a shadow network of scribes and translators. The script is Akkadian, the lingua franca of the age, but the phrasing carries subtle quirks suggesting a non-native speaker. Perhaps this was the work of a Cypriot diplomat trained in foreign courts, or an Egyptian scribe stationed abroad to streamline communications. Either way, it reveals a world where complex ideas crossed linguistic borders effortlessly, where a broken piece of clay could carry the nuance of alliances and threats across kingdoms. Most poignant is the letter's unfinished business. The tablet breaks mid-sentence, its final plea lost to the waves. Was it a request for Egyptian grain? A warning about rising Hittite aggression? We'll never know, but its very incompleteness speaks volumes. This wasn't just a message, it was part of a conversation. One voice in a chorus of kings, merchants, and envoys who kept the Bronze Age's fragile peace afloat. And now, pulled from the seabed, it reminds us that even the mightiest empires relied on something as simple as clay and ink to hold their world together. The lead tablet feels heavy in the archaeologist's hand, not from its weight, but from the weight of its words. Recovered from a shipwreck near the Greek island of Dokos, this folded sheet of metal bears a message scratched in haste. Poseidon, earth shaker, hear me. Grant calm seas and fair winds, and I vow 3 fine bowls of silver at your temple. It's not a royal decree or a merchant's ledger, but something far more intimate, a whispered conversation between a terrified sailor and the god he believed controlled his fate. What makes this artifact extraordinary isn't just its survival after 3 millennia underwater. It's the raw humanity preserved in those uneven Greek letters, each stroke of the stylus trembling with desperation and hope. This wasn't some standardized prayer copied by temple scribes. The handwriting varies wildly, with letters crammed together as if written in a rocking hold. The promises made to Poseidon are strikingly personal, not the grand offerings of kings, but the modest pledges of a working trader, silver bowls, a share of the cargo's profits, even a promise to sing your praises in every port. The specificity is heartbreaking. One line pleads for protection against the tricks of dishonest merchants, while another begs deliverance from the monsters that lurk beyond the headland. Here, etched into soft lead, is the Bronze Age equivalent of white-knuckling the wheel during a storm, proof that ancient sailors faced the same visceral fears as any modern mariner. But this tablet is more than a relic of superstition. It's a window into how Bronze Age people negotiated with the divine. The language reads like a contract with clear terms. If Poseidon provides safe passage, the merchant will uphold his end. This transactional approach to religion reveals a world where gods weren't distant arbiters but active participants in daily life. Archaeologists have found similar vows inscribed on temple walls, but never one so mobile, a prayer meant to travel with its supplicant, as if the words themselves could act as a charm against the sea's wrath. The choice of lead as a medium is equally revealing. Unlike clay tablets used for official records, lead was cheap and portable, something a merchant could fold and tuck into his tunic. Some scholars believe these curse tablets were ritually sunk, their messages deliberately consigned to the god's domain. Yet this one never reached its intended depths, remaining aboard as the ship met its doom. The irony is palpable, a plea for salvation preserved by the very disaster it sought to avert. What lingers longest, though, are the human details, the scribbled addition of "and my son's health" beside the main text. The thumbprint still visible in the lead's corner pressed there in urgency. This wasn't just commerce or faith, it was a father's love, a man's livelihood, all distilled into a few desperate lines. In that moment, the Bronze Age collapses from abstraction into aching reality. We're no longer studying artifacts, we're reading a letter from the past, one that echoes across the centuries with a universal truth: the sea giveth, and the sea taketh away, and all we can do is pray. The Sardinia copper ledger doesn't just record numbers, it tells the story of an ancient industrial revolution written in sweat and fire. Found nestled among the remains of a trading vessel that sank off the island's rugged coast, this clay tablet is crammed with symbols in a distinctive Cypriot script, its surface scored with columns of figures that reveal a mining operation running like clockwork. Shifts are meticulously logged: day crew 20 men, night watch 12, along with output quotas that would make a modern factory manager nod in recognition. But what makes this ledger extraordinary isn't its efficiency, it's the names. Workers aren't just tallied as numbers, they're identified by origin: Cretan smelters, Mycenaean ore carriers, even Sardinian locals serving as guides. This wasn't just a mine, it was a Bronze Age United Nations of labor, where diverse cultures collided in the pursuit of the era's most precious commodity. Copper was the oil of the ancient world, and this tablet lays bare its supply chain with startling precision. Each entry tracks ore from extraction to shipment: 50 ingots to Ugarit, 30 reserved for the palace at Knossos. The quotas themselves are revealing specific amounts allotted to different destinations, suggesting a highly organized distribution network. One particularly telling note mandates an emergency shipment to Cyprus after a furnace failure at their main smelting site, proving these operations had contingency plans for disruptions. The ledger even documents quality control with annotations like "second grade" or "pure" scribbled beside certain batches, showing these weren't just miners but discerning metallurgists who understood their product's value. The human stories leap from the clay, a line mentioning double rations for the men who repaired the landslide hints at dangerous working conditions, while another records a deduction from pay for broken tools. There's even a scribbled note in the margin: "Remember the midwinter feast," suggesting seasonal breaks in the relentless production cycle. Most striking are the wages, payments in grain, oil, and sometimes silver, with amounts varying by role and seniority. The Sardinian locals, interestingly, are consistently paid in finished bronze tools rather than raw materials, a clever incentive that turned laborers into loyal customers for the very goods they helped create. This ledger shatters the stereotype of ancient mining as crude pickaxe work. The scale of organization rivals modern operations with rotating shifts, specialized roles, and detailed inventory tracking. Workers weren't anonymous slaves but skilled migrants, their origins carefully noted as if foreshadowing today's globalized workforce. The tablet's very existence is proof of a system sophisticated enough to need such records, a system where copper wasn't just dug up but managed, from the moment ore left the ground to its transformation into weapons, tools, and trade goods. Perhaps most revolutionary is what this says about cultural exchange. The script's Cypriot roots paired with Sardinian location suggest a hybrid system where writing methods traveled with the experts who used them. Like finding a manual written in one language but used halfway across the world, it underscores how Bronze Age industries transcended borders. The men listed on this tablet may have spoken different languages, worshipped different gods, but they shared a common purpose and a common ledger that, thanks to a shipwreck, now lets us eavesdrop on their world. Every smudged number is a fingerprint, every column a testament to the collaborative ingenuity that powered the ancient Mediterranean's beating industrial heart. The clay tablet pulled from the wreckage near Lebanon's coast doesn't just mention the sea peoples, it speaks in their voice. Waterlogged and cracked, this palm-sized slab bears jagged symbols unlike any known Bronze Age script, yet scattered words leap out with terrifying clarity. Burned cities, ships beyond counting, hunger driving us onward. For over a century, historians blamed these mysterious seafarers for toppling empires, but always through the bitter accounts of their victims. Here, at last, is a fragment that might tell their side of the story, if only we could fully understand it. What makes this inscription revolutionary isn't just its content, but its context. Found amidst a cargo of Cypriot pottery and Egyptian glass, the tablet appears to be a ship's log, its entries dated across several moons. One passage describes taking grain stores from a coastal town. Another mentions leaving the sick with the Keftiu people, likely Minoan Crete. These aren't the boasts of mindless raiders, they're pragmatic records of a civilization in motion. The language itself is a linguistic mosaic, mixing borrowed Akkadian terms with untranslatable words that may represent the sea people's native tongue. Like finding a diary written partly in code, every decipherable phrase only deepens the mystery. The most chilling revelation comes in a partially damaged section referencing the Great Shaking. Some scholars interpret this as the catastrophic earthquakes that rocked the Mediterranean around 1200 BC, events that may have displaced entire populations. Could the Sea People's infamous invasions have been desperate migrations of climate refugees? The tablet's tone shifts abruptly from triumph to despair. One line boasts of rich plunder from Hatti lands, while another laments children crying for bread. This duality shatters the simplistic barbarian narrative, painting instead a portrait of complex people responding to collapsing ecosystems and failing states. Even the script's physicality tells a story. The symbols are hastily etched, some letters overlapping as if written in turbulent seas. Yet the overall structure shows remarkable consistency, with clear divisions between entries and standardized glyphs for numbers. This wasn't graffiti scrawled by pirates. It was the working document of a literate society, one that tracked supplies, routes, and losses with bureaucratic precision. The very fact it was preserved suggests such records were common precious fragments of a lost administrative system that vanished when their ships sank. Most haunting are the personal touches. A thumbprint smudges one corner, perhaps from a scribe bracing against the waves. Near the tablet's broken edge, a single word stands alone: remember. Is it a plea to future generations or a note to self amid the chaos? We may never fully crack this enigmatic text, but its existence changes everything. The Sea Peoples weren't just the villains of someone else's history, they were chroniclers of their own, and on this salt-crusted clay, their world whispers back. The Babylonian astrological chart pulled from the wreckage isn't just a map of the stars, it's a passport stamp from ancient knowledge's farthest journey. Found nestled between amphorae of olive oil and ingots of Cypriot copper, this clay tablet bears the unmistakable wedge-shaped markings of Babylonian cuneiform, but its location, far from Mesopotamia's rivers, tells a revolutionary story. The symbols align perfectly with known Babylonian star maps from 1200 BC, plotting constellations like the Lion and the Scorpion with mathematical precision. Yet here it lay in the hold of a ship that sank near Crete, proving Babylonian astronomy didn't just belong to temple priests, it sailed the open seas. What makes this tablet extraordinary is how it bridges two worlds. On one side, it's a scientific instrument, its markings so precise they could still guide a ship by the stars today. The calculations for Venus's movements match those found in Babylon's royal archives, showing these weren't rough copies but exact replicas of state-sanctioned knowledge. Yet flip it over and you'll find something unexpected, a dedication in Greek script calling upon the gods to protect the bearer of this celestial gift. This wasn't just navigation equipment, it was a diplomatic offering meant to dazzle foreign rulers with Babylonian sophistication. Imagine a Mycenaean king receiving this like some ancient power move. Your people track seasons by crop cycles. We chart the heavens themselves. The implications ripple outward like waves. For centuries, historians assumed advanced astronomy was locked within Mesopotamian ziggurats. But this chart traveled farther than most merchants dared, carried by scribes who must have served as both scientists and envoys. Its presence on a trading vessel suggests something even more radical, that celestial knowledge was itself a commodity, traded alongside spices and metals. Perhaps captains paid dearly for these star maps, knowing they could shave weeks off a voyage by sailing during optimal lunar phases. Or maybe they were status symbols, the Bronze Age equivalent of displaying an expensive watch. Then there's the craftsmanship. Unlike administrative tablets meant for quick use, this one was carefully fired, its edges smoothed for handling at sea. The star symbols are deeper and more ornate than typical cuneiform, almost as if designed to catch flickering lamplight during nighttime navigation. Most telling. Traces of beeswax found in its grooves suggest it was once sealed in a protective case, a treasure too valuable to leave exposed. This single clay rectangle rewrites the history of science as we know it. The Babylonians didn't just invent astronomy, they exported it, embedding their understanding of the cosmos in clay that sailed to the edges of their world. And when that ship went down, it didn't just lose cargo, it submerged a key to understanding how knowledge flowed in the ancient world, proving that even the stars weren't beyond the reach of Bronze Age globalization. The Hittite captain's will isn't just a list of possessions, it's a window into a Bronze Age mariner's soul, pressed forever into damp clay. Discovered in the remains of a coastal trading vessel near ancient Troy, this cracked tablet begins with words that still resonate, "If the sea claims me." What follows is a meticulous division of life's accumulations, not among nobles or priests, but a ship's cook, a sail mender, even the young deckhand who served with steady hands. The specificity is staggering. 5 bolts of purple-dyed linen for the first mate, a bronze adze with the ivory handle to the carpenter and to the captain's sister back in Hattusa, the silver ring our mother wore. These weren't just objects, they were memories, trust, and hard-won wealth, distributed with a care that defies 3,000 years of separation. What makes this document extraordinary is its blend of formality and intimacy. The language follows strict Hittite legal conventions. Witnesses are named. Seals are described, yet between the lines pulses very human emotion. One bequest leaves a copper kettle to the crew's mess, that they may remember our shared meals when the winds howled. Another gifts a prized dagger to a rival captain. Though we quarreled often, let this mark our peace. Even the risks of maritime life are laid bare in practical instructions. If certain heirs perish before the will is executed, their shares pass to the temple of the storm god, who rules both waves and justice. The will also reveals unexpected social dynamics. Female crew members appear as equal inheritors. A sailmaker's daughter receives 2 fine oars, for her skills surpassing even her father's. Debts are forgiven as readily as they're collected, with one sailor's promised wages converted to 3 measures of grain for his widow in Ugarit. Most poignant is the captain's awareness of his own mortality. Unlike land-bound wills that might assume years of life remaining, this document carries urgency, its final lines hastily added. And if my body is found, wrap it in the sailcloth from the Cyprus run, and lay me where the headland meets the dawn. Legal scholars marvel at its sophistication. The will accounts for scenarios modern estate planners would recognize: disputed claims, alternate beneficiaries, even instructions for handling undiscovered cargo. Yet historians hear deeper echoes. This wasn't just a captain preparing for death. It was a man stitching his community together against the unraveling threat of the sea. When he wrote, "Let no quarrel arise from these gifts," he wasn't just dividing property. He was preserving the bonds that made maritime trade possible across the ancient world. That this fragile record survived is nothing short of miraculous. The tablet was found tucked inside a waterproof leather pouch, itself nestled beside the ship's rudder post, as if the captain wanted it found. Today, as we trace our fingers over its cuneiform grooves, we're not just reading a legal document. We're witnessing the moment a sailor, surrounded by creaking timbers and distant stars, dared to imagine his absence. And in doing so, left us his enduring presence. The Cypriot-Grain Agreement doesn't just list quantities and prices. It reads like a Bronze Age legal thriller, with clauses and contingencies that would hold up in court today. Found in the belly of a shipwreck near Alexandria, this sun-baked tablet details a deal struck between Egyptian and Cypriot merchants around 1200 B. See, its cuneiform script spelling out terms so precise they blur the line between ancient and modern commerce. At first glance, it's straightforward: 500 measures of Egyptian grain in exchange for Cypriot copper. But the fine print reveals a world where handshakes weren't enough, where trust was etched into clay with the force of law. What makes this contract extraordinary are its stipulations. The grain must be free of weevils and sand, the copper ingots of standard weight as held in the Temple of Memphis. Penalties for late delivery are brutal: a 20% surcharge for every lunar cycle the shipment is delayed, plus compensation for spoiled cargo. One particularly ingenious clause requires disputes to be settled by a joint council of Egyptian and Cypriot merchants, preventing either side from gaming the system. This wasn't just bartering, it was a binding agreement with teeth, showing how Bronze Age traders navigated risks across treacherous seas and shifting alliances. The human drama leaps from the clay. A scribbled addendum notes that one shipment will be delayed due to the pharaoh's troops requisitioning barges, proving even ancient merchants dealt with government red tape. Another passage guarantees safe passage through pirate-infested waters, with the Cypriots pledging to replace any grain lost to raids, evidence that maritime insurance isn't the modern innovation we thought. Most revealing, the signatures, not just official seals but personal marks from the merchants themselves, including a woman named T, identified as a grain factor of Thebes. Her presence shatters assumptions about gender roles in ancient trade, proving women held influential positions in this high-stakes world. This tablet does more than record a transaction. It captures a moment when commerce became civilization's connective tissue. The Egyptians needed copper for tools and weapons. The Cypriots relied on Nile grain to feed their island. Neither could thrive without the other, and this fragile clay contract was the lifeline that bound them. Today, as we decipher its symbols, we're not just reading a shopping list from 3,000 years ago. We're witnessing the birth of globalization, one carefully worded clause at a time. The tax records pulled from the seabed near Rhodes don't just list numbers, they resurrect an entire city swallowed by time. These waterlogged tablets, written in a jumble of scripts from Greek to Phoenician, are the paperwork of a bustling port that vanished from history's map. Imagine clerks hunched over clay in a harborside office, recording every amphora of wine, every load of Lebanese cedar, every human life traded as cargo. The precision is staggering. 10 jars of Thasian wine, duty paid in silver, 3 prime timbers from Byblos, 1/10 value to the harbor master, even the heartbreaking entry, 1 strong youth from the north, 2 shekels tariff. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was the heartbeat of a cosmopolitan hub where languages and cultures collided with every docking ship. What makes these records revolutionary is how they fill a blank spot on the Bronze Age's economic map. Historians had found scattered references to a wealthy port somewhere between Crete and Anatolia, but never physical proof until now. The tablets don't just confirm the city existed, they paint its skyline with words. One mentions taxes funding the new quay extension. Another references warehouse fees paid to the Temple of the Sea God. Suddenly, we're not guessing about a theoretical trading post, we're walking its docks, hearing the creak of ropes as ships unload goods from a dozen kingdoms. The tax rates themselves tell a story of economic sophistication. Luxury items like purple dye or ivory carried heavy tariffs, while bulk goods like grain or pottery moved almost tax-free, a deliberate policy to encourage essential trade. Some entries show discounts for merchants who'd traded there for years, proving loyalty programs aren't a modern invention. Most revealing are the currencies accepted: silver by weight, Egyptian gold rings, even copper ingots stamped with a particular king's seal. This wasn't a backwater, it was a financial nexus where value was fluid and trust was built into the system. Then there's the darker side, the slave tariffs. Unlike other goods taxed by value, humans were assessed per head, their prices standardized like commodities. The records are chillingly matter of fact. 2 adolescent girls from the Lucca lands, 3 shekels each. Yet even here, nuance emerges. Some entries note slaves traveling with their original owners, suggesting servitude wasn't always permanent. One poignant line records a man paying his own tariff, buying his freedom upon reaching the port. The real magic lies in the tablet's survival. Most ancient ports left traces of buildings or pottery, but administrative records rarely endured. That these fragile clay documents survived underwater, their inked symbols still legible after millennia, feels like the city itself reaching through time. As we decipher each line, we're not just learning about tariffs, we're hearing the shouts of stevedores, smelling salt and spices, watching a lost world come alive again. And in doing so, we're forced to rewrite history. This wasn't some minor way station. It was the Hong Kong of its age, a glittering crossroads where the Mediterranean's pulse could truly be felt. The silver scroll gleamed dully in the lamplight when archaeologists first unrolled it, its surface etched with delicate symbols that seemed to dance like candle flames. Among the clay tablets listing cargo manifests and tax records, this was something entirely unexpected, a love poem, whispered across 3,000 years in an ancient Anatolian tongue. The words, once pressed into soft metal by a love-struck scribe or homesick sailor, speak of the ache of empty hands and nights stretched long as the horizon. It's a voice that cuts through the Bronze Age's grand narratives of empires and trade routes, reminding us that history isn't just written in treaties and ledgers. It's scratched onto precious metals by heartsick lovers, carried in the pockets of those who dared to cross the sea. What makes this fragile artifact so extraordinary is its intimacy. Unlike formal hymns carved into temple walls, this poem feels intensely personal. The imagery is tactile and immediate. The scent of cedar on a lover's skin, the way moonlight pools in a shared drinking cup. Linguists tracing its structure have found striking parallels to later Greek lyric poetry, suggesting these emotional rhythms crossed cultures and centuries. One particularly poignant verse describes counting the days until reunion by carving notches into a ship's rail, blending the mundane reality of maritime life with profound longing. The scroll's physical form tells its own romantic tale. Silver was valuable but softer than clay, easier to damage. This wasn't meant to be filed away but touched, reread, perhaps even worn close to the skin. Forensic analysis revealed faint traces of oil where fingers had gripped it repeatedly, the metallic surface worn smooth in spots from constant handling. The very choice of material speaks volumes. A merchant might inscribe contracts on clay, but for bearing one's soul, only silver would do. Historians are divided about its origins. Some argue the sophisticated metaphors suggest a professional court poet's work, possibly commissioned by some wealthy trader to send home. Others point to the nautical references tides, oars, the east wind's cruel laughter, as evidence it was composed by a sailor himself. The most tantalizing theory, that it was written collaboratively with different hands adding verses over time, becoming a communal expression of absence that resonated with an entire crew. This delicate scroll does more than add poetry to the Bronze Age. It rewrites our understanding of literacy's spread. That such emotional complexity could be expressed in writing proves Anatolian languages had developed far beyond simple record-keeping. The poem's survival is equally miraculous. Silver typically corrodes in seawater, but this scroll was found carefully sealed inside a hollowed-out elephant tusk, protected like the precious cargo it was. Today, as scholars painstakingly reconstruct its verses, we're not just translating words, we're overhearing a conversation between two lovers across millennia, their voices rising unbidden from the depths to remind us that the past was never as distant as it seems. The fragment of clay might look unremarkable at first glance, just another broken piece in a pile of Bronze Age rubble. But when researchers brushed away the centuries of grime, they uncovered something extraordinary, lines of linear B script detailing how to mix resin with beeswax for hull seams and lash the yardarm with ropes of doubled thickness. This wasn't a prayer or a cargo list, it was a shipbuilder's manual, the Bronze Age equivalent of an engineering textbook, preserved by sheer luck in the belly of a wreck near Crete. What makes this cracked tablet so revolutionary is its specificity. Unlike artistic depictions of ships or vague historical references, here were step-by-step instructions from actual craftsmen. The text describes sealing hull planks with a waterproofing mix of resin, wax, and crushed shells, a formula modern tests confirm would repel water brilliantly. Another passage details rigging techniques to distribute sail stress evenly, preventing catastrophic mid-voyage collapses. The language is terse, practical, devoid of poetry but rich with hard-won knowledge. When it mentions the bow must curve like a bull's horn for proper cleaving of waves, you can almost hear generations of shipwrights nodding in agreement. The manual also reveals surprising sophistication in Bronze Age naval architecture. One section discusses calculating cargo weight distribution using water displacement, a principle we associate with Archimedes over a millennium later. Another specifies different wood types for various components, cedar for masts for its lightness, oak for keels, that resist worm and rot. Most startling is a passage on modular construction, suggesting ships were built in prefabricated sections that could be assembled or disassembled for transport over land. This wasn't just boat building, it was precision engineering on an industrial scale. Perhaps most moving are the human touches scribbled between the technical lines. A note warns apprentices to check knots at dawn when dew makes flaws visible, while another casually mentions stealing the rival Minoan's sail designs, but adding 2 extra braces. There's even what appears to be a quality control checklist. Inspect all lashings twice before the captain's review, proving even ancient craftsmen dealt with workplace protocols. This humble fragment does more than describe ship construction. It rewrites our understanding of Bronze Age globalization. The techniques documented here would have produced vessels capable of crossing the open Mediterranean, not just hugging coastlines. When the manual mentions 30-day provisions for deep water routes, it confirms these weren't just traders but explorers pushing beyond known horizons. Every splinter of knowledge preserved on this clay tablet was a thread in the vast net that connected empires, making the Mediterranean not a barrier but a bridge between worlds. And thanks to a shipwreck's cruel irony, the very manual that taught them to conquer the waves ended up returning to them, waiting centuries to teach us instead. The clay tablet is small enough to fit in your palm, its edges worn smooth by time and tide, but the words pressed into its surface carry the weight of an entire world unraveling. Found half buried in the silt near Syria's coast, this Akkadian inscription isn't a royal decree or a merchant's contract, it's a cry for help. To the king of Alashia, it begins, "Your servants flee like birds before the fire." What follows is a harrowing account of villages reduced to ashes, fields choked with weeds, and children with no bread but the dust of the road. This isn't just a historical artifact, it's a Bronze Age refugee petition, a snapshot of ordinary lives caught in the crossfire of empires. What makes this tablet so devastating is its immediacy. The scribe's stylus dug deep into the clay where the plea crescendos. "We are 30 households, our old men weak, our infants wailing." Specific names punctuate the desperation: Ashtanu the potter, Zaluti, who once kept the olive presses, transforming statistics into faces. Unlike the polished language of court correspondence, these words stumble with raw urgency, sentences breaking mid-thought as if the writer's hand shook. One line mentions burying the dead beneath the broken walls of our granary, a detail so visceral it pins you to the present moment of their grief. The political backdrop sharpens the tragedy. Scholars date the tablet to the late 13th century B.C., when the Hittite Empire crumbled and the so-called Sea Peoples raised coastal cities. But here, the grand narratives of collapse fade behind intimate suffering. The refugees don't care about geopolitical theories, they beg for a corner of land to till and promise loyalty in exchange. Their tone veers between deference and despair, addressing the king as son of all nations one moment, then bluntly warning, "Soon there will be no one left to pay your taxes the next." Archaeologists found this tablet beside others in a sunken merchant's chest, suggesting it was part of a larger diplomatic packet. Perhaps the sender hoped a trader could deliver it discreetly, bypassing enemy blockades. The fact that it never reached its destination is achingly clear. The king of Alashia's reply, if one was sent, lies lost to time, but the tablet's survival is its own kind of answer. 3,000 years later, their words still resonate with anyone who's ever fled violence, any parent who's whispered, "Just a little farther," to exhausted children. Most poignant is the scribble at the bottom, a child's attempt at writing, perhaps a youngster leaning over the scribe's shoulder. The marks are clumsy but recognizable, the symbol for home. Whether wishful thinking or a final declaration of identity, it's a reminder that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit claws toward hope. This salt-stained fragment does more than document a crisis. It forces us to confront the timeless truth that history's grandest arcs are built on countless small, shattered lives. And in doing so, it bridges the millennia between their world and ours, where the same sea that swallowed their plea still carries others like it today. The glassmaker's tablet shatters more than just our assumptions. It reveals a Bronze Age world humming with scientific exchange. Found nestled between amphorae of wine and bundles of cedar wood on a ship bound for Egypt, this palm-sized clay fragment holds what might be history's first surviving recipe for synthetic glass. The cuneiform script, pressed into the damp clay by a Mesopotamian scribe over 3,000 years ago, reads like a modern chemistry manual. Take 60 parts sand, 180 parts natron, heat until the mixture sings. That word, sings, is no poetic flourish. Ancient artisans knew the exact moment when silica and alkali fused, signaled by a distinctive high-pitched ringing. This wasn't just craft, it was controlled, repeatable science passed hand to hand across empires. What makes this tablet revolutionary isn't just its age, but its precision. Ingredients are measured to precise ratios: 5 parts manganese to remove cloudiness, 3 parts copper for lapis hue, proving these weren't random experiments but standardized formulas. The instructions even account for atmospheric conditions, advising winter firings when the air is still and dry. Such details reveal an empirical understanding of materials that rivals modern labs. Archaeologists testing these recipes were stunned when the ancient ratios produced glass virtually identical to shards found in Tutankhamun's tomb, proving this wasn't just theory but a working blueprint for luxury. The tablet's journey tells its own story. Written in Mesopotamia but found on a ship sailing to Egypt, it embodies the Silk Road of its day, not for silk but for knowledge. Glass was more precious than gold in the Bronze Age, a technology so coveted that kingdoms guarded their techniques like state secrets. Yet here, in the belly of a merchant vessel, was proof that artisans shared their deepest trade secrets across cultures. The scribe even included troubleshooting notes. If bubbles form, add powdered deer antler. Such tips weren't just helpful hints, they were the intellectual property of their time, passed between workshops from Babylon to Thebes. Consider the hands that touched this knowledge. A Mesopotamian master glassblower pressing symbols into clay, perhaps teaching his apprentice to memorize the words. A Phoenician trader sealing the tablet in oiled cloth, aware its worth rivaled the cargo it accompanied. An Egyptian noble receiving it like sacred text, commissioning royal workshops to replicate the formulas. This chain of trust rewrites our understanding of ancient innovation. It wasn't just kings and conquerors driving progress, but artisans whispering recipes across deserts and seas. Most astonishing is what the recipe doesn't say. There are no incantations to gods, no rituals, just clean, methodical steps. The omission speaks volumes. By the late Bronze Age, glassmaking had transcended magic to become pure applied science. Yet for all its technical brilliance, the tablet's survival hinges on tragedy. The ship carrying it sank before reaching port, its cargo suspended in time until modern divers breached the silence. Now, as we pore over its symbols, we're not just decoding a recipe. We're witnessing the moment humanity learned to transform Earth's dust into something luminous, and in doing so, began to shape the modern world. The Hittite Spy Report doesn't just document ancient espionage. It reads like a Bronze Age thriller, its cuneiform symbols pulsing with urgency. Recovered from a sunken vessel near Cyprus, this cracked tablet opens with a chilling line: "The enemy moves like wolves in the night." What follows is a masterclass in intelligence gathering, detailing troop movements, supply routes, and even the morale of rival forces with clinical precision. The anonymous agent notes which mountain passes are lightly guarded, which coastal towns lack watchtowers, and ominously, where the black ships gather. This wasn't just observation, it was strategic reconnaissance, proof that 3,000 years ago, information warfare could make or break empires. What makes this tablet extraordinary is its blend of raw intelligence and polished analysis. The spy doesn't merely report facts, they interpret them. One passage deciphers the significance of increased copper shipments to a rival port, not for tools but for arrowheads. Another reads like ancient psychological profiling, describing how enemy commanders quarrel over spoils like jackals. The level of detail is staggering. The agent even records the types of bread baked in military camps, barley loaves suggesting local supply lines, wheat indicating shipments from distant allies. These weren't random notes, they were calculated clues to predict enemy capabilities. The report's survival is equally fascinating. Unlike royal correspondence sealed in clay envelopes, this tablet was deliberately left unmarked, its surface smudged in places as if someone had hurriedly erased identifying signs. Forensic analysis revealed traces of oil and salt, evidence it was hidden in a leather pouch, perhaps strapped to the spy's body during their escape. The writing itself is a study in tradecraft. Key phrases are coded using Hittite puns that would baffle outsiders. A reference to the harvest moon doesn't describe agriculture but signals an attack timeline, while the potter's kiln burns hot warns of weapon production. Most revealing is the tactical advice woven through the warnings. The spy doesn't just sound alarms, they propose concrete countermeasures. Block the eastern pass with felled cedars, station archers where the river bends. This was no passive observer but a seasoned operative, likely embedded for months. One heartbreaking line suggests the cost of their mission. I can no longer send messages by the usual route. Whether the spy was discovered or the ship intercepted, the fact that this report sank before reaching its destination adds a layer of tragic irony. Their life-saving intelligence vanished beneath the waves, just as the invasion it predicted swept ashore. This salt-stained tablet does more than reveal ancient spycraft, it humanizes it. Between the military assessments are flashes of personality, frustration at a rival's incompetence, admiration for a clever deception, even dry humor describing a drunken enemy feast. These weren't faceless agents but sharp-minded individuals who understood the weight of their work. When the report concludes with "the hour is late" and the storm gathers, we hear not just a warning to kings long turned to dust, but a timeless truth about the fragile line between safety and catastrophe, a line that still depends on those brave enough to watch from the shadows. The lead tablet feels unnervingly heavy in the archaeologist's palm, not from its weight, but from the curse it carries, pulled from a Greek shipwreck dating back to 1300 B. See, this unassuming metal sheet bears an oath so binding it would make a modern lawyer shudder. Etched in jagged early Greek script, the words invoke Zeus, Poseidon, and a host of lesser deities to strike down any crew member who betrays their sworn duties. May the earth swallow him, may the waves deny his bones rest, may his children wither like unwatered vines. This wasn't just a promise, it was a supernatural contract, signed in the presence of gods and sealed by the ever-present threat of the deep. What makes this artifact extraordinary isn't just its malevolent poetry, but the glimpse it offers into Bronze Age psychology. Facing the Mediterranean's capricious storms and pirate-infested routes, sailors didn't rely solely on skill or courage. They bound themselves together with rituals thicker than blood. The oath structure reveals meticulous craft. Specific violations are named stealing cargo, abandoning post during storms, and each divine punishment matches the crime. A thief would lose his hands to the jaws of sea monsters, while a coward who fled battle would wander eternally as a ghost between worlds. This wasn't superstition, It was a brilliantly engineered social tool, leveraging deep-seated beliefs to maintain order where laws couldn't reach. The tablet's physical form tells its own story. Unlike clay tablets meant for ledgers or letters, this lead sheet was meant to last. The metal would have been expensive, a deliberate choice signaling the oath's gravity. Forensic analysis revealed something even more startling. Tiny holes along the edges suggest it was once nailed to the ship's mast, a constant reminder looming over every crew member. Imagine working beneath that ominous text, feeling its silent weight during night watches when the waves grew restless. Most revealing are the names scratched at the bottom, not just the captain and officers, but the cook, the rowers, even the ship's boy. This egalitarian inclusion proves everyone aboard, regardless of rank, was bound by the same terrifying pact. One poignant signature is barely legible, the shaky letters of someone likely illiterate, guided by another's hand to mark his consent. In that moment, the tablet stops being an artifact and becomes a window. We're witnessing the exact instant a young sailor, perhaps on his first voyage, pledged his life to both his crew and the unforgiving gods above. The oath's survival is its own kind of miracle. Lead corrodes easily in seawater, yet this tablet was found nestled inside a clay jar filled with beeswax, an ancient time capsule deliberately sealed against the elements. Was it hidden for safekeeping, or was the jar itself part of the ritual? Some scholars believe crews would melt such tablets after safe returns, dissolving the curses in ceremonial fires. That this one never met its intended fate suggests a ship that vanished before completing its journey, leaving the oath eternally unbroken and eternally unforgotten. Today, as we decipher those corroded lines, we're not just reading words, we're touching the visceral fears and desperate camaraderie of people who stared into the abyss together. In an age before coast guards or insurance policies, this scrap of metal was their lifeline, their moral compass, their shared understanding that some lines couldn't be crossed, not because of earthly consequences, but because the sea itself would remember. And in the end, it did. The wooden tablet feels alive under the fingertips, not smooth like clay, but textured with the grain of a tree that grew 3,000 years ago. Carved into its surface, a merchant's hurried script curves around knots in the wood, each stroke preserving moments that history books never could. The taste of salt spray, the ache of homesickness, the thrill of a good bargain in a foreign port. This isn't just a diary, it's a time machine transporting us directly into the sandals of a Bronze Age trader, navigating the unpredictable waters between Crete and Sardinia. His journey begins with frustration, a delayed departure due to the harbormaster's greed, a complaint as timeless as commerce itself. The entries start matter-of-factly, lists of cargo, olive oil, saffron, and those ubiquitous Minoan pottery cups shaped like bulls, but soon deepen into something richer. A storm off the Peloponnese coast terrifies him into poetic clarity. The waves stood like walls, and the ship groaned like a bull in its death throes. You can almost hear the rigging straining, feel the deck lurching beneath his feet. What saves them isn't just seamanship, but diplomacy. The crew lightens the load by jettisoning cargo, but he notes with pride that the Sardinian trader's goods were spared to keep the peace. The markets come alive through his eyes. At a Sicilian stopover, he haggles over Cypriot copper with a merchant whose tongue was as twisted as the serpent bracelets he wore. In Sardinia, he marvels at the Nurag towers, those mysterious stone structures that still puzzle archaeologists today. His description of the locals, proud as lions, with eyes that miss nothing, contradicts ancient Greek accounts that dismissed Sardinians as primitive. Most revealing are his casual interactions. A shared meal with an Egyptian sailor leads to an impromptu language lesson. He carefully transcribes phrases like, "How much for this?" and "your wine is strong" in a clumsy mix of hieratic and Cretan symbols. But it's the small human moments that linger. He frets over a daughter's fever back home, promising to bring her Sardinian honey if the gods allow. A cryptic entry mentions a midnight argument with the ship's cook over the divided lentils, a feud so petty it feels ripped from a modern workplace. And then there's the heart-stopping simplicity of his final surviving line, scratched hastily as land appears on the horizon. "Today I saw the sun." This humble plank of wood does more than record a voyage. It shatters the distance between millennia. When he describes counting coins by lamplight or laughing with rivals over shared wine, we're not studying the past. We're sitting beside him on that creaking ship, staring at the same stars, reminded that adventure and anxiety, cunning and camaraderie, haven't changed since the first sailor pushed off from shore. The Bronze Age wasn't an era of artifacts, it was a world of people, and thanks to one merchant's need to mark his days, their voices still carry across the waves. The stone slab emerges from the darkness like a page ripped from the god's own storybook, its surface carved with figures that seem to ripple as if underwater. Here, amidst the shattered amphorae and rusted anchors of a Bronze Age wreck, lies not a cargo manifest or a diplomatic letter, but a myth. The tale unfolds in a linguistic tapestry, Greek heroes speaking in Phoenician script while Egyptian deities respond in Luwian hieroglyphs. This isn't just a story, it's a cultural crossroads cast in stone, a desperate plea for protection whispered across languages to every deity who might be listening. At first glance, the narrative follows familiar bones. A hero battles the sea god's wrath to rescue his crew, striking a bargain that calms the waves. But the details rewrite what we know about ancient belief systems. The hero isn't some legendary demigod, but a merchant captain named Dagonos, his name etched beside his hometown of Ugarit. The sea monster he defeats isn't an abstract terror, but described with startling specificity. Its scales like overlapping shields, its breath fouling the sails. Most startling, the climactic prayer isn't addressed to Poseidon or any single pantheon, but to all who hear below and above the waves, suggesting sailors saw divinity as a collaborative force rather than competing factions. The slab's physical form reveals its sacred purpose, carved from a single piece of rare black basalt, stone believed to repel evil spirits. Its edges are worn smooth from repeated touch. Forensic analysis detected traces of olive oil in the grooves, evidence it was ritually anointed before voyages, but the true genius lies in its multilingual approach. By weaving together the sacred scripts of every port the ship might visit, the creators crafted a sort of divine passport, ensuring no matter whose waters they entered, some deity would recognize the plea. Imagine it lashed to the mast, catching the first light of dawn as sailors traced the figures with salt-cracked fingers, whispering translations in half a dozen tongues. What unfolds next in the story's second half shocked researchers. Just as the hero secures his crew's safety, the tablet shifts from myth to startling reality. A detailed sailing route appears between the lines of verse, naming hidden coves and safe anchorages along the Anatolian coast. Even more practical, timestamps tied to constellations. When the bear's tail touches the horizon, make for the Bay of Three Palms. This wasn't just a spiritual guide, it was nautical intelligence disguised as sacred text, ensuring the knowledge would be preserved and revered rather than discarded as mere notes. The ancients didn't separate the practical from the divine. To them, survival required both. Most poignant is the human handprint pressed into the slab's corner, preserved in mineral deposits. Unlike the formal carvings, this mark is asymmetrical, almost accidental, as if someone had steadied themselves against the stone during rough seas. In that faint impression, the distance between us and them collapses. We're no longer analyzing an artifact but touching the same surface that once anchored a sailor's prayers, feeling the same desperate hope that the story etched there might somehow shape their fate. The slab's very survival seems miraculous. Basalt should have shattered on impact with the seabed. Yet here it lies intact, as if the gods themselves honored the bargain inscribed upon it, preserving this fragile bridge between mortal courage and the mercy of the deep. This fusion of myth and reality changes everything. We used to assume ancient sailors saw the sea as chaotic, their rituals mere superstitions. But this slab tells a different story of people who navigated both waves and wonder with equal skill, who understood that survival required more than sturdy planks and strong oars. It demanded stories sturdy enough to hold against the storm, and faith as vast as the horizon itself. In the end, the slab's greatest magic isn't its carvings or its multilingual spells, but its quiet testimony that sometimes the most powerful armor against the unknown isn't steel or stone, but a story well told. The broken tablet lies heavy in the conservator's tray, its edges jagged where time, or perhaps desperate hands, shattered it centuries ago. This last of the 23 scripts isn't just damaged, it's a haunting silhouette of a message we'll never fully hear. The surviving lines pulse with urgency, send grain before the moon. And the children cry for, before the clay fractures into silence. Unlike the other shipwrecked texts, contracts, prayers, inventories, this fragment refuses categorization. Is it a merchant's final plea as storms closed in, a governor's warning of famine, or something darker, like the first chaotic lines of an evacuation order as invaders breached city gates? The ambiguity is its power. What makes this shattered script so unforgettable isn't just what it says, but what it represents, the delicate thread connecting us to the past. Each fracture line mirrors the gaps in our understanding, the way history reaches us in pieces, demanding we lean closer to hear its whispers. The tablet's physical state tells its own story. The clay bears faint fingerprints near the broken edge, as if someone clutched it tightly in transit. Traces of salt crust the surface, not from the shipwreck, but from dried seawater splashed aboard during its final voyage. This wasn't stored safely in a cargo hold. It was in someone's hands when disaster struck. Historians have tried every tool to reconstruct its meaning. Multispectral imaging revealed ghostly indentations where missing sections once lay, hinting at numerals, perhaps quantities of grain or days until some dreaded deadline. The handwriting itself offers clues. The letters grow progressively more erratic, the wedge-shaped cuneiform strokes deepening as if pressed by a shaking stylus. One theory suggests the scribe wrote aboard a storm-tossed ship, his usual precision undone by the lurching deck. Another posits the tablet was deliberately smashed, its message too dangerous to survive intact. Yet even incomplete, this fragment reshapes our view of the Bronze Age collapse. Unlike grand narratives of earthquakes or invading armies, it forces us to confront the human scale of catastrophe. That plea for grain, it aligns with climate data showing prolonged droughts around 1200 BC. The mention of children, a reminder that behind every historical population decline statistic were real families starving in real time. The tablet's very incompleteness becomes its truth. History isn't a tidy story with clear endings, but a collection of interrupted lives, their last words often left mid-sentence. Perhaps most moving is how this shard of clay defies oblivion. The ship that carried it sank in deep water, where most organic cargo dissolved centuries ago. But the tablet, baked hard by some long-ago fire, maybe a burning port city or a scribe's kiln, survived the depths like a time capsule. Its survival feels like a counterweight to all we've lost. For every library burned or archive crumbled, this one broken message made it through. Now, as conservators painstakingly stabilize its fractures, the tablet does something extraordinary. It turns us into collaborators with the past. Every new scanning technology, every linguistic breakthrough offers another chance to decode its secrets. That's the paradox of these 23 scripts. The more we uncover, the more we recognize how much remains just beyond reach. And so this final fragment, even in its silence, becomes a call to action, a reminder that history isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation that never truly ends. Somewhere beneath the waves or buried in desert sands, another shipwreck waits, another tablet lies ready to speak. All we have to do is listen. These 23 shipwreck scripts don't just rewrite history, they humanize it. Every time we brush the salt from a cracked clay tablet or painstakingly piece together a lead scroll's corroded message, we're not just recovering artifacts. We're meeting people, a Hittite captain carefully dividing his belongings among his crew, a lovesick poet pouring his longing onto silver, a merchant frantically updating his ledger as storms threaten to swallow his ship whole. These voices from the deep remind us that the Bronze Age wasn't some distant mythical era. It was a time as vibrant and complicated as our own, where people laughed, schemed, prayed, and persevered against all odds. What's truly astonishing isn't just what these scripts reveal, but how they survived. Fire could destroy a palace archive, earthquakes could topple temples, but the sea, it guarded these messages like a jealous librarian, preserving them in cold, dark silence until we were ready to listen. The very waters that once carried these words to their intended recipients became their unlikely protectors, cradling them for millennia. Now, as we decipher each line, we're not just studying the past, we're completing journeys interrupted centuries ago, delivering letters that never reached their destinations. And here's the thrilling part, this is only the beginning. For every tablet we've recovered, there are countless others still hidden beneath the waves, nestled in undiscovered wrecks or buried under shifting sands. New diving technologies and imaging tools are letting us explore depths once thought unreachable, while advances in linguistics are helping us crack scripts that have puzzled scholars for generations. Who knows what's still out there? Maybe a merchant's diary detailing the first circumnavigation of Africa. Perhaps a treaty between empires we never knew existed. Or even, just maybe, that elusive bilingual text that could finally unlock Linear A's secrets once and for all. That's the real magic of these discoveries. They don't just add to our knowledge, they change how we see ourselves. When a Bronze Age sailor's prayer echoes our own fears of the unknown, or a 3,000-year-old trade dispute feels eerily familiar, the past stops being a foreign country. It becomes a mirror showing us that for all our technological advances, the human heart hasn't changed. We still crave connection, still wrestle with power and greed, still find ways to create beauty in the face of uncertainty. So here's to the next wave of discoveries, literally. Whether you're a history buff, an armchair adventurer, or just someone who loves a good story, this journey isn't over. The Mediterranean still holds its secrets close, but every year we're learning how to listen a little better. If this dive into the deep resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to join us on future explorations, and drop a comment below telling us which of these shipwrecked scripts fascinated you most. After all, history isn't just something we study, it's something we make together, one rediscovered story at a time.